you know, a keynote speaker, you look for somebody who really fits that bill perfectly for the HBPA. And a lot of times I really do try to gravitate towards somebody who's got skin in the game, who understands our industry, and oftentimes you can't find both. But this time we did. Senator Damon Thayer understands the industry. He's an HBPA member. He's an owner with CJ Thoroughbreds. He understands the legislative side of it. And more importantly now, because of the issue that we have going on in Florida in particular, Senator Thayer has stepped up to help push the initiatives to help stop decoupling in the state of Florida. And I feel confident with him guiding the ship that we'll be able to, defeat what the FTBOA has worked at for 10 years. We're going to work again to defeat decoupling, and then hopefully on the other side of that, figure out what's going to happen with racing in South Florida, with or without Gulfstream. But we don't want South Florida racing to end, but we need all the right people pushing in the right direction. And as was started and continues to push from Lonnie Powell and his group, and Steve Cook is here, thankfully, showing support for our group, we're going to keep pushing forward and try to make this happen. Stop decoupling, and then have individuals such as Damon Thayer help us navigate where we go in the future. So with that, Senator Damon Thayer.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Eric, I'm not Eric. I can never grow a beard that good. My beard envy, what can I say? Look, I'm less than 60 days from retiring from the Kentucky General Assembly. I'm just happy that somebody wants to hear what I have to say. You know, when you do something for 12 years, or 12 years as majority leader, 22 years in the state Senate, you never know if the phone's going to ring. It was definitely a risk, but it appears there is plenty of opportunity out there for someone like me to continue helping the industry that I love so much. Now that we are in a time of uncertainty in the horse racing industry, there are definitely some storm clouds, and they're not just on the horizon, they're right there in front of us. HISA, whatever you call it, is a polarizing event in our industry. The bill snuck through during the dark of night in the budget reconciliation process by people I like and respect, but disagree with on this issue because I'm a states' rights guy. 10th Amendment what simply says that what the federal government should only do what the states can't do for themselves. And as was mentioned earlier today, about 12, 13 years ago, I passed an interstate compact law in Kentucky. It's on the books. Kentucky can participate in an interstate compact. I'm for uniformity across all jurisdictions. I think that's the best thing for our horses, our jockeys, and for the public optics, that story we have to tell to maintain our social license to operate. If you follow me on Twitter, Damon_Thayer, I still call it Twitter. I still call the Commanders the Redskins. Still call X Twitter. I'm old-fashioned, I admit it. If you follow me on Twitter, you know that I've been critical of HISA. I think its implementation has been botched. I have a big problem with the due process. You all know the issues. We spent a lot of time on it today. I also don't think that the federal government should foist upon us an $85 million law and not pay for it. Why is it that the states have to pay for a federal law? I passed a resolution on one of my last days as a member of the Kentucky State Senate. It passed 38-0. Kentucky State Senate's sentiment is that the federal government should pay for HISA. And it was sent to Senator McConnell and Congressman Barr and every member of the Kentucky congressional delegation. It's a problem. It's a big problem because the costs are going to be borne by horsemen or bettors in the form of increased takeout. I know Florida has a little bit of a different deal. Hats off to you, Lonnie, on that. But in Kentucky, the state government's not going to pay for the implementation of HISA, so the tracks are either going to have to do it themselves or pass the costs on to horsemen or bettors. So what eventually is going to happen, until and if we get a replacement law or the Supreme Court rules it unconstitutional, is there are going to be states that are going to decide that they're not going to participate in HISA. And they're going to forego the simulcasting rights under the Interstate Horse Racing Act. And we're going to have less uniformity under that scenario than we had before the formation of HISA. So that's a polarizing event, and that, you know, there are a lot of people where I live in my area code who are for it. I would like to help be a voice to try to make it better, or get it replaced with something better. Here in Florida, big storm clouds forming. A Canadian company, Canadian-owned company, owned by someone who used to be a Canadian member of Parliament, up there in the 51st state. Oh wait, sorry, we haven't done that yet. It's threatening a $3 billion industry. Look, guys, Eric knew what he was getting when he got me. I'm going to say controversial things. It might make you laugh, it might make you cringe, but hopefully you'll at least remember what I said. But that Canadian company, who got the privilege of having a casino at its racetrack in Hallandale Beach, Florida, in exchange for a casino that makes it $50 to $60 million a year, now wants to back out of that commitment and leave high and dry an industry with a $3 billion economic impact and nearly 33,000 jobs. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And there are other issues. All you have to do is go on Twitter. There's a lot of negativity about horse racing on there if you choose to look for it. But I'm going to focus for a little bit on the positives. What are some of the positives out there about our industry these days? Well, social media is one of them. If you can deal with some of the negativity, horse racing has tremendous coverage on social media. My preferred platform is Twitter, but there are other platforms too where you can engage and be an advocate for the industry. Podcasts, racing podcasts, just a crazy number of really good racing podcasts out there. Rail Talk, Ron Flatter, and many, many more. And then how about satellite radio? Multiple shows on satellite radio. We've got Steve Bick and his huge hit broadcasting from here every morning this week. How about television? On a daily basis, you can watch horse racing live on 2 different FanDuel networks and on Fox. On Saturday, I was watching the Rebel Stakes, watching on TVG. Sorry, again, old-fashioned. I don't call it FanDuel as much as I still call it TVG. Lonnie Briley wins the Rebel. Great story, reminiscent of Smarty Jones and California Chrome. And Andy Biancone gets the first interview on TVG, and you can see Maggie Wolfendale waiting right behind her to interview her on Fox. Lonnie, that's something we could have never imagined 30 years ago. That's a positive. That's a positive. We're going to hear from Tina Bond and her Heart of Horse Racing proposal later today. Another very positive. I see the CEO of Equibase is here. I'm really enthused about this project to start a race ratings system in America. I don't think we ever get rid of claiming races, but as someone who participates in the yearling market, where we buy well-bred yearling fillies who often turn out to be slow. A lot of them go to Dr. Rob Holland because they have throat problems. Thanks for fixing some of those. You don't want to drop them in a claiming race. You'd like to be able to continue racing them, but you can't because they're going to get taken because their pedigree is so good. So I think that's a very, very good positive. In Maryland, the state government is floating a $400 million bond to rebuild Pimlico, build a training center. Maryland is cooperating with Virginia to create the beginnings of a mid-Atlantic circuit. I think that's positive. In New York, state government, $500 million to rebuild Belmont Park, which by all accounts will be a super track in every definition. And then, of course, the one that I'm particularly fond of, and that's the Kentucky story. Right now at Turfway Park, our maidens are running for 85,000 maiden special weight. At Keeneland, they'll be 110. Thank you, Dr. Holland. At Churchill, 120,000. At Ellis Park, there'll probably be at least 80, maybe 85,000 maiden special weights because Churchill Downs just opened a $100 million OTB with 600 HHR machines in Owensboro. So Ellis Park's purses are going to continue to go up. And then you all know the story about our all-turf meet at Kentucky Downs, $150,000 to $170,000 maiden specials. It's a great success story, and state government isn't even investing in physical plant facilities like in Maryland, New York. The private sector is doing that. Churchill Downs bought Turfway Park for $50 million and invested another $150 million in it. They bought Ellis Park. They're investing in the facility there, plus they built a new OTB. They built a harness track in Western Kentucky. Keeneland is in the middle of a $90 million addition to its facilities. Let's see, Ron Winchell and Mark Falcone at Kentucky Downs. If you haven't been there, you need to come. It's a pretty special experience, and they're building a sports book you can see from the moon to attract the folks from Nashville because they don't have retail sports betting in Tennessee, just online. Ron and Mark have a harness track in Eastern Kentucky. We're seeing billions of dollars being spent on facilities in Kentucky because of a couple of laws that we passed in Kentucky that allow the industry to invest in itself. And this was not a slam dunk. Back in 2009, because of the success that I saw at Oaklawn Park, I wrote a letter to then Attorney General Jack Conway, and I asked him if what we called instant racing at the time was a pari-mutuel game. He handed down an official opinion from the Attorney General office saying that it is pari-mutuel as long as it's regulated by the Racing Commission. So our Racing Commission got to work writing the rules, and in 2011, Corey Johnson, who then was part of the ownership team at Kentucky Downs, became the first track to implement historic horse racing machines. Slowly but surely, other tracks started to add it, and we started to see our purses go up. But there were several court cases at multiple levels: District, Court of Appeals, Supreme Court, and at every step of the way, the court upheld the legality of what we now call historical horse racing machines. But then in September of 2020, we were caught flat-footed, much like recently occurred here in Florida, when the Supreme Court reversed its position after 10 years of lawsuits from the Family Foundation, an extremely right-wing group that's opposed to gambling of all forms. They'd get rid of horse racing if they could. They won, and the Supreme Court overturned its previous opinions and said it requires an act of the legislature to make these games statutory. That was a scary time, a really scary time, because you look at what we have now and you say, wow, this is great. It's always been this way in Kentucky. Not true. The threat was real. If it hadn't passed, I think there'd probably only be Keeneland in the spring and the fall, and a short derby-centric meet at Churchill Downs in Kentucky. Because if we didn't pass the law, the machines would have had to have been shut down, turned off, removed, put on the scrap heap of history as a potentially glorious time in Kentucky come to an end. But we were able, because of the amazing advocacy efforts of everybody getting together and rowing in the same direction, we were able to get it passed. It was not easy. I've still got the scars to prove it, but it was the biggest fight of my political life, and one worth fighting and one worth winning, because you see the results now. Over the course of the next 3 years, my last few years in the General Assembly, we passed 5 different bills to help the horse industry. Historic horse racing. The year after that, we passed a tax bill taxing all pari-mutuel wagers, live, simulcast, ADW, HHR, at 1.5% of gross, with the statutory amounts going to our various development funds, Remy's program at BCTC, the U of L Equine program, the University of Kentucky Animal Science program. We put all those in statute. Then we came back under the leadership of my friend State Representative Adam Koenig. We passed a sports betting bill. Probably one of the best sports betting bills in America. You can do it that way when you're the 38th of 50 states to pass it, because you can look at what others did right and did wrong. Adam tied in his bill, tied all of the the sports betting online licenses to a racetrack. And the only place that you can make a retail sports bet in Kentucky is at a racetrack or OTB. So we're bringing in new customers to experience our pari-mutuel products. We passed a bill banning the illegal gray machines because they are a threat in convenience stores and gas stations across Kentucky. Some of you in other states are familiar with these operators. Not good. And we banned those machines in Kentucky. And then finally, last year we passed a new bill turning the Racing Commission into the Kentucky Horse Racing and Gaming Corporation. It will now oversee horse racing, sports betting, and charitable gaming, and bring a better level of professionalism and political independence to a board that now oversees a multi-billion-dollar and multifaceted gaming industry. How did we get there? Well, you know, it's funny, I see my friend Marty Malign here, and I've known Marty since I moved to work at Turfway in northern Kentucky in 1992. Marty and I have been on the same sides of some issues, and we've been on the opposite sides of some issues. Same with my good friend Rick Hiles and Dale Romans. But we're all friends here on the other side. And you know, when you get everybody in a room, you've got racetracks, some owned by individuals, some with a nonprofit model like Keeneland, some owned by a big corporation like Churchill Downs, and you've got the HBPA, and you've got the Kentucky Thoroughbred Association, you've got the Commercial Consigners and Breeders Association, and you've got the Kentucky Equine Education Project. All these disparate interests don't often align. But the easiest way to get a legislator to say no is when your industry isn't aligned. Because when legislatures are in session, the members get hit with multiple messages every day. Literally hundreds. Be for this bill, be for my amendment, kill this bill. It's mind-boggling what they have to absorb every day. And if an industry isn't aligned, the easiest thing for a legislator to do is to wash their hands of it and say, I'm a no. But our industry got aligned in quickly because of this one truism. Cooperation is always better than extinction. Cooperation is always better than extinction. So what are some lessons that you can take back to your states? Well, number one, wherever you live, except, and I know we have a bunch of folks here from Nebraska, they only have one legislator because they have a unicameral legislature in Nebraska. They just have a Senate, so they just have one member. But in every other state, you have two members of your legislature who represent you. Generally a representative or an assembly member and a senator. You should get to know them. Whoever your personal legislators are, get to know them now. Don't wait for a crisis, because there will be a crisis. There will be a need. There will be a break the glass, pull the fire alarm moment. Build those relationships now, not just when you need something. Get to know your legislator. Go to your state capital, set up a meeting with them, and tell them about your industry. Try to get 15 minutes. Believe me, that's a lot of time in a legislator's day. If you can get 15 minutes, take some of your employees, your family members, other people who live in their districts. They are most responsive. Trust me, I won 7 elections by widening margins because I listened to my constituents. Even if I disagreed with them, I would meet with them and give them a chance for me to hear them out. So build those relationships, and when they're not in session, invite them to the racetrack, or your farm, or your training center, or your vet clinic. They need to see the jobs. Tell them how many checks you write a month to vendors, how many checks you write to blacksmiths, veterinarians, chiropractors, feed stores. You all have probably a dozen or more vendors a month that you write checks to out of your business. That's how we were able to do it in Kentucky, and I have lectured my friends in the industry there to keep those relationships going. because there will be a crisis again someday. Because we have it doesn't mean somebody isn't going to want to take it away. There are enemies of horse racing even in Kentucky. There are those on the far left who want to tax it more just because they want the money and they want to spend it on their stuff. And then there are those on the far right that I mentioned earlier today who are unalterably opposed to gaming and they'd like to tax it out of existence. So you have to be vigilant, but you've got to build these relationships because cooperation is always preferable to extinction. So that brings us to Florida. A couple of weeks ago, Eric asked me if I would write an op-ed under the NHBPA banner talking about the similarities between Kentucky's situation in 2020 and Florida's situation today with decoupling. And I said, absolutely, I would be happy to do that. It's an easy comparison to make. In Kentucky, we were trying to pass a bill to save an industry. Here in Florida, we're trying to kill a bill to save an industry. So a few days after that, I got the op-ed came out, and I got a call from Mark Cassey. You all know, dual Hall of Fame trainer in Canada and here in the States. He's won the Derby and the Preakness and Breeders' Cup races and a lot of races all over North America. And he said, we're going to put together a group in Florida, and we're going to try to get all the interests together to work against this bill. Would you be willing to help us out? And I said, absolutely, as long as Lonnie Powell is involved. So in less than 2 weeks, we formed the Thoroughbred Racing Initiative. We have David O'Farrell from Ocala Stud as our president, Jonathan Green from DJ Stables as our vice president, and our board members are Barry Eiselman, Dr. Eiselman, and also we've got Aaron Wellman. I know he's in California, but we wanted to have somebody from outside of the state on the board to help with that perspective. We have joined together as sort of a convening force with the FTBOA, the Tampa HBPA, South Florida Horsemen, and Ocala Breeder Sales, OBS. We have hired a lobbyist. I'm acting as senior advisor. Doesn't mean I'm going to go to Tallahassee and testify. That may or may not be the best tactic, but I do understand both languages, legislation and horse racing. We've already had one call that the lobbying firm that we hired, Reuben Turnbull, as kind of a convening agency. We've had a call with Lonnie's lobbyist and Eric on the phone, and Tampa HPPA's lobbyist and OBS's lobbyist, and we're discussing strategy. It looks like the bill is going to pass the House. The House sponsor is the House Budget Committee chairman, and it looks like the skids are pretty greased in Tallahassee for it to pass the House. So our goal is to kill the decoupling bill in the Senate. It's going to be a tough uphill climb, but we're all working together. We're all working together because remember, cooperation always is better than extinction. And that's what we're threatened with here. The Stronach Group is going back on the deal it made with the horse industry 20 years ago, Lonnie? And they make 50, 60 million a year out of that casino. And they just want to walk away from it all and leave these jobs on the floor. And we're going to do everything we can to stop that bill. And then also to version 2.0, we want to work with the same group to try to figure out what the future is for horse racing in Florida. I mean, this is a great horse racing and breeding state. And I've had some people say, well, why, you're from Kentucky, why do you care about Florida? Because Florida and Kentucky are inextricably linked. I mean, 80% of our weanlings into 2-year-olds come here to get broke. The biggest operations in the business have their 2-year-olds broke here in Ocala. And the breeding industries do not exist on an island. Yes, I'm proud of the fact that Kentucky has 52% of the market share, but I also want Florida to have a healthy number of mares. So these farms down here with stallions and boarding operations can continue to thrive and create the jobs that they do. So if you want to follow us, we're on Twitter and Facebook. You can look up our website, thoroughbredracinginitiative.com. You can make a contribution there. No contribution is too small. I think one thing we've learned in politics recently, winning campaigns are funded by small donors. So anything you can do to help us out, we'd be very grateful. I'm working in some other states and talking in some other states because it appears that perhaps my post-legislative life can be summed up in the following phrase: trying to save horse racing one state at a time. In my opinion, who will survive in horse racing over the next 5 to 10 years? I believe it's states where the industry has great relationships with their legislators and their legislature. And I know I'm going to leave some out, but I'm going to give some examples. Kentucky, Maryland, New York, the Triple Crown states. Virginia, things are going very well in Virginia. Arkansas, Indiana, just to name a few. And I know there are others. But you've got to work to strengthen those relationships. You've got to be able to tell your story from an authentic point of view. Legislators can see through inauthenticity quite easily. Some of them are inauthentic themselves. I know I've worked with some of them. But they can tell people who love their industry and have a great story to tell about the jobs, the tourism, the preservation of land and green space, the taxes paid, reinvested into the economy, the taxes paid to state and local governments. We have a great story to tell. This is the greatest game played outdoors. Like you, I bring new people to the races all the time, and they love it and they want to go back. So just remember, we have a great story to tell. Cooperation is greater than extinction. But don't kid yourself about the threats and the storm clouds that are on the horizon. But there is a playbook out there. There's a playbook. You can achieve bipartisan success. There will be different reasons. Republicans will support your bills for different reasons than Democrats. Rural legislators will support your bills for different reasons than urban and suburban legislators. But the only way to be able to tell that story is to build those relationships. Do it individually yourself. Do it through the groups that you're a member of, through your local HBPA and other associations. It's been a real honor and a privilege to be asked to address you here today. Thanks for listening to an old retired guy trying to figure out what he's going to do after 22 years making laws in Kentucky.